I never thought I'd be the guy to mess with someone's straight label, but here I am, living proof that sometimes the lines you think are clear get blurred in the most unexpected ways. Honestly, if you'd told me a year ago that I'd move in with a guy who swore he was straight and end up falling for him, I probably would have laughed and called you crazy. But that's exactly how it went down. So let me back up a bit. I'm Jake, 28, city transplant from a small Midwestern town, working in marketing. When I got the job offer in this new city, let's call it Portland, for the sake of argument, I knew I needed a place fast. But being new, and on a budget, meant I was hunting for roommates online, desperate to find a spot that wouldn't drain my savings. That's how I met Liam. He was the only guy who responded to my ad within the first hour, which was a good sign. We chatted briefly, and he seemed, well, normal enough. He said he worked in tech, was 30, liked hiking and craft beer. All pretty standard stuff. When asked about his lifestyle or relationship status, he casually mentioned he was single and, quote, definitely straight. I remember thinking, okay, that's straightforward. No weird roommate drama ahead. We met that weekend to check out the apartment, a decent 2-bedroom in an old brick building downtown. The place had character, which I liked, and Liam seemed chill, the kind of guy you could just hang out with and not have to overthink every conversation. He showed me the room, gave me the intro to the neighborhood, and we agreed I'd move in the following week. The first few days were exactly what you'd expect. 2 guys sharing a space, doing our own thing. Liam kept to his routine. Morning runs, working long hours, weekend hikes with friends. I had mine too. Late nights editing campaigns, lazy Sunday mornings with coffee and podcasts. We'd say hi, sometimes grab a beer after work, but nothing more than casual roommate stuff. But then something started to shift. It wasn't like a light bulb going off. It was more like a slow sunrise, subtle and steady. I noticed little things. The way Liam's laugh got softer when he talked about his family, or how he'd linger a second longer when our hands brushed reaching for the same bowl in the kitchen. I caught myself wondering what it would be like to know him beyond the straight guy roommate label. One night, after a particularly exhausting day, I found Liam sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone, looking a bit off. I asked him what was up, and he shrugged, saying work was stressful. But then he opened up about how he felt stuck, like maybe he'd been living his life by a script that didn't quite fit anymore. That's when he dropped the line that caught me completely off guard. I don't even know if I'm as straight as I thought I was. At first, I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to step back, respect his space. But another part, deeper, more sincere, wanted to lean in and say, me neither. And that's where everything started to get complicated, in the best way possible. Because when you move in with someone who's supposed to be straight, and suddenly the definition of straight isn't so clear, you realize how messy and beautiful life and love really are. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The truth is, nothing changed overnight. It was a slow, awkward, sometimes hilarious process of 2 guys trying to figure out what the hell was happening between us. And trust me, you don't want to miss how that story unfolds. What followed that night was a kind of unspoken truce between us. Liam didn't suddenly start wearing a neon sign that said, "Confused straight guy," and I didn't jump in with a checklist of my own feelings. Instead, we just kept living together, and gradually, the walls Liam had built around himself started to crack, ever so slightly. A couple of weeks later, we were sitting in the living room, just hanging out after work. I was half watching a documentary about some obscure music scene. Liam was scrolling through his phone, and I felt this weird tension in the air, like something unsaid was just waiting for the right moment. Finally, he looked up. "Jake," he said, voice low. "Can I ask you something kind of strange?" "Shoot," I said. At that point, I was game for anything. Have you ever, I don't know, felt attraction to someone you didn't expect? Like, someone you thought you'd only see as a friend? I smiled, because, yeah, I knew exactly what he meant. More times than I can count, I admitted. Life's full of surprises. Why? He shrugged, looking a little embarrassed. I'm trying to figure myself out. I've always thought of myself as straight, but lately I catch myself thinking about guys differently, especially you. I caught my breath without meaning to. The way he said it, so casual, like it was the most normal thing in the world, made my heart race. You mean, like, more than just roommates? He nodded, a little sheepishly. Yeah, I know it sounds weird. I don't want to mess up what we have or freak you out. I shook my head, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm not freaked out. Honestly, it's kind of the most interesting thing that's happened to me in a while. That was our first real conversation about it, but not the last. Over the next few days, we tiptoed around this new territory, testing boundaries without saying too much. There were little moments, like the time I caught Liam staring at me when I wasn't paying attention, or when he brushed my arm a second longer than necessary when handing me a beer. It was subtle, but it was there, thickening the air between us. One night, after a late dinner and way too much wine, we ended up sitting closer than usual on the couch. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the radiator, and I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. I glanced at Liam, who was fiddling with his fingers, avoiding my eyes. "Hey," I said softly. He looked up, and for a moment it was like we both realized we were standing on the same edge, about to leap or fall. I swallowed the lump in my throat and took a breath. "I don't want to pressure you into anything, but if you're curious, even a little, I'm here." His lips twitched into a nervous smile. "I'm curious, more than I expected." That night, we didn't rush into anything. No dramatic confessions or sudden kisses. Instead, we really talked, about what this could mean for us. About the fear of changing who we thought we were. About the comfort and safety of our routines. About the possibility of something new and maybe a little scary. It was the kind of conversation where you realize that labels don't always fit, and that sometimes the heart wants what it wants, even if it doesn't come with clear instructions. The days that followed were complicated, in the best way. We started spending more time together, grabbing coffee in the mornings, sharing playlists, and finding excuses to touch, like brushing hands while passing dishes, or leaning close to hear each other over the noise of the city outside. It felt like discovering a secret language that only we understood. But with that closeness came moments of doubt. Liam would pull back sometimes, retreating into himself like he was wrestling with something fierce. I tried not to take it personally, knowing that for him, this was uncharted territory. One evening, after a long hike in the nearby woods, we stopped by a small cafe to warm up and grab hot chocolate. The place was cozy, filled with the scent of cinnamon and fresh coffee. We sat in a corner booth, side by side, the quiet crackle of the fireplace making everything feel a little softer. Liam looked over at me, his face open but vulnerable. "Jake, I'm scared. Scared of what this means, of what people might think, of messing up the only stable thing I have." I reached out and took his hand, surprising both of us. "Hey, it's okay to be scared, but you're not alone. Whatever this is, we'll figure it out together." He squeezed my hand tight, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of relief in his eyes. That night, when we got back to the apartment, things shifted again. The hesitations melted away in the quiet dark, replaced by something tender and real. We talked, laughed, kissed, and slowly, carefully, crossed the line from roommates to something else, something neither of us was expecting, but both of us needed. Looking back, it's wild how much changed, because I took a chance on moving in with a guy who said he was straight. Liam taught me that love isn't about fitting into boxes or ticking labels. It's messy, unpredictable, and sometimes it comes knocking when you least expect it, in the form of a roommate who wasn't supposed to be anything more. We're still figuring it out, still navigating what this new chapter means. But one thing's for sure. Life is never boring when you're willing to blur the lines. And neither is love. After that night, things between Liam and me started to take on a new rhythm. It wasn't this sudden dramatic transformation where we declared some grand romantic commitment or anything. No, it was way more subtle and real than that. Like, mornings felt warmer when he was around, and the apartment seemed to breathe easier with the quiet understanding growing between us. Still, we hadn't exactly put a label on whatever it was we were doing. I think neither of us was ready for that kind of pressure. But small moments spoke louder than words. Like when Liam would make me a second cup of coffee just because he knew I was dragging that day, or when I caught him watching me from across the room with this look that made me forget what I was even doing. One afternoon, we were out grocery shopping together, wandering the aisles debating between frozen pizza brands. Liam picked up a bag of the spicy pepperoni ones and smiled at me. "You always pick the weirdest pizza," he teased. "Hey, spicy is life." I shot back, nudging him with my shoulder. He laughed, and for a split second, I thought about how easy it felt to be around him. No pretense, no pretending to be something we weren't. Just two guys figuring it out. Later, back at the apartment, we cooked dinner together. Neither of us are chefs, but it's fun to pretend, you know. Liam was chopping veggies while I stirred the pasta. Suddenly, he reached over and brushed a stray hair from my forehead. It was a tiny gesture, but damn, it lit something inside me. "Jake," he said softly, "can I be honest?" "Always," I replied, not sure what to expect. "I'm scared that if I let this go too far, I'll lose myself. Or that people won't get it. Or that I'll regret it." I nodded, knowing exactly where he was coming from. Change is scary, but sometimes it's also what we need. "No one said this would be easy, but I'm here with you." He smiled, but I could tell the fear hadn't fully lifted. That's when I thought, okay, maybe it's time to stop dancing around it and just say what I'm feeling. "Liam," I said, reaching out to take his hand again, "I don't want to just be your roommate or your experiment or whatever label you're afraid of. I want to be more than that. I think I've been wanting that for a while." He looked at me for a long moment, and then, finally, he leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't perfect. There were awkward pauses, little smiles, and hesitations, but it was real, and it was ours. From that day on, we started telling our story in small ways. We told a few close friends, carefully testing the waters. Some were surprised, some didn't get it, but there were also those who cheered us on, telling us that love doesn't fit into neat boxes and that what mattered was that we were happy. At work, we kept things private for a while. Liam's tech job was pretty traditional, and I could tell he wasn't ready for everyone to know. But when I saw him standing tall, no longer hiding, sharing little stories about us here and there, I knew he was growing into this new version of himself. The hardest part? Facing the moments when Liam would doubt himself. Like one night, he came home looking drained, eyes dark with uncertainty. "I'm sorry," he said, sinking onto the couch. "Maybe I'm just confused. Maybe I'm fooling myself." I sat beside him, careful not to crowd. "You're not fooling anyone but yourself, and that's okay. Figuring this out isn't a race. It's messy and slow. But I'm here, Liam. No matter what." He looked at me, and in that look, I saw a promise forming. A fragile, beautiful promise that whatever came next, we'd face it together. And honestly, that's what makes this whole thing so damn worth it. Because in the middle of all the confusion and fear, there's this incredible connection. A kind of love that sneaks up on you when you least expect it, reshaping everything you thought you knew about yourself and the people you thought you'd be. Living with Liam has been the most unexpected chapter of my life, full of laughter, late-night talks, awkward first kisses, and the kind of quiet moments that make you feel like you're exactly where you're supposed to be. So yeah, he was straight until I moved in. But now, the lines have blurred in all the best ways, and I wouldn't trade this messy, beautiful journey for anything. The thing about this kind of shift, when someone you thought you knew completely starts revealing layers you never saw coming, is that it throws everything into a weird, thrilling kind of chaos. Liam and I had settled into a rhythm, sure, but it wasn't always smooth sailing. There were moments where I'd catch him hesitating, like wrestling with some invisible weight, and I knew it was the fear of stepping too far outside the box he'd spent his whole life in. One Friday night, a few weeks after that first kiss, we found ourselves at a local bar with a few friends. The place was dim and buzzing, the kind of spot where you can disappear into the noise and forget the outside world for a couple of hours. I was chatting with a buddy about some campaign, and Liam was nearby, nursing a beer and looking a little lost in thought. Out of nowhere, one of our friends nudged Liam and said, "So you two are actually a thing now, huh?" The question hung in the air, loud and clear. I saw Liam stiffen, eyes flicking to me like he wanted to hide. "Yeah," he muttered, voice low. It was a simple acknowledgement, but for Liam, I could tell it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. After a moment, he looked at me, hesitated, then added, "I'm still figuring out what this means." I smiled, reaching to squeeze his hand under the table. "No rush," I said. "We're both figuring it out." Later, as we walked back to the apartment, the city lights casting long shadows on the pavement, Liam finally opened up. "Jake, I'm scared of losing who I thought I was. Like all these years, I had a clear idea of myself, and suddenly, it's all blurry." I nodded, trying to put into words what I'd felt too. "I get it. It's like your whole identity gets questioned, and that's scary as hell. But maybe who you thought you were isn't all there is to you." He looked at me, eyes searching. "Do you think people can change who they are?" "I think people can grow and surprise themselves. And sometimes, love is what pushes you to do that." That night, something shifted again, not because of some grand gesture, but because Liam allowed himself to be vulnerable in a way he hadn't before. The days after that were filled with quiet moments, where we both let down our guards a little more. We started sharing music playlists, and I introduced him to the podcasts that helped me make sense of my own messy feelings. He showed me pictures from his childhood, stories about his family, and even some of the first art projects he'd done as a kid. One evening, we got caught in a sudden downpour walking home from a tiny record store. We dashed into the nearest doorway, laughing and soaked through. Liam looked over at me, eyes sparkling with something that wasn't just amusement. "Maybe this city isn't so bad," he said, shaking raindrops from his hair. "Nope," I agreed, pulling my jacket tighter around both of us. "Not bad at all." It was in those little slices of everyday life that the connection deepened. We weren't just roommates or some experiment in blurry close-knituality. We were becoming partners in the truest, most human sense. But as things warmed between us, the outside world sometimes felt colder. A few of Liam's friends from work started asking questions, some curious, some judgmental. He'd come home after those interactions looking drained, sometimes retreating into silence. One night, he finally broke down in front of me, overwhelmed by the pressure. "Jake," he said, voice cracking, "I don't know if I'm strong enough to deal with all this. What if I'm wrong? What if this whole thing was just a phase?" I held him close, feeling the fragility beneath that tough exterior. "Liam, this isn't about being strong enough. It's about being honest. With yourself and with me. And no matter what happens, I'm not going anywhere." In that moment, I could see him start to believe it. Fast forward a couple of months, and we had a quiet Saturday morning ritual going. Coffee, some scrambled eggs, and an old movie playing softly in the background. Liam looked over at me, eyes tired but peaceful. "You know," he said, "I thought I was supposed to have it all figured out by now. But maybe life's just about trying new things and being okay with not knowing." I grinned. "That sounds like a pretty solid life philosophy." He smiled back, a little shy, then reached over to tug my hand across the table. "Thanks for being patient with me," he said. "For helping me see that maybe I don't have to fit into one box." "Anytime," I said. "Because honestly, I think the best parts of life happen when we stop trying to label everything." We sat there for a while, just enjoying the quiet, letting the simplicity of the moment remind us that sometimes the most profound connections come disguised as everyday moments. Looking back, it's wild to think about how a simple Craigslist ad turned into this unexpected journey. Liam, the guy who was definitely straight, is now the person I share my hopes, fears, and dreams with. We're still figuring it out, still navigating the blurred lines, but there's a kind of magic in that uncertainty, because love, real love, doesn't care about labels or expectations. It just finds you, sometimes when you least expect it, and changes everything. We weren't moving at lightning speed, but the quiet progress we made felt huge to me. Liam was opening up, bit by bit, showing parts of himself he'd kept hidden even from his closest friends. And I was learning how to be patient, something I've always struggled with, to be honest, because I knew this wasn't just about us. It was about Liam rediscovering himself. One Sunday morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and pancakes, which was a new thing around our place. Liam had never been much of a cook, but suddenly he was experimenting in the kitchen. I shuffled into the living room, bleary-eyed, and found him in the middle of flipping a pancake in the tiny kitchen we'd squeezed into this old apartment. "Morning, sleepyhead," he said, grinning like he'd just won a small battle. "Wow, gourmet breakfast," I joked, sitting down at the table. "Did you watch a cooking show or something?" He laughed, a little embarrassed. "Nah, YouTube tutorials. I figured if I'm gonna mess this up, might as well do it properly." We ate together, the sunlight streaming through the windows, painting everything gold. It felt like a snapshot of normalcy we could hold on to amidst all the chaos of change. After breakfast, we sat on the couch, and Liam surprised me by pulling out a photo album from a shelf. It was old, worn, filled with pictures of his family, vacations, childhood friends. He flipped through it slowly, pointing out faces and stories I'd never heard. "That's me, at 8, trying to play soccer," he said, smiling at a picture of a gangly kid with a crooked grin. I listened, fascinated by these glimpses into the past. "You've got a cool story, you know. I'm glad you're letting me in." He shrugged, but there was warmth in his eyes. "I don't know if I'm letting you in as much as I'm finally letting myself in." That struck a chord I wasn't expecting. As the days passed, we started spending more time outside the apartment, too. Our weekend hikes became rituals, just the two of us, sometimes with a dog we borrowed from a neighbor, wandering trails, talking about everything and nothing. Liam seemed lighter out there, like the fresh air helped shake off some of the doubts. One afternoon, we found a quiet spot overlooking the city. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky in pinks and oranges. Liam sat beside me, shoulders relaxed for once. "Jake," he began, voice barely above a whisper, "I think I'm starting to get it. Maybe this, us, it's not about fitting into a box. It's about finding someone who makes you feel like you don't have to pretend." I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Exactly. And I'm glad it's you." He laughed softly, then looked at me seriously. "You know, I'm still scared sometimes, of what people will say, of losing old parts of myself. But with you, I don't feel so alone." I reached out, taking his hand gently. "You're not alone. We're in this together." Then, reality hit us both like a cold splash of water. One evening, Liam got a call from his sister. She'd found out about us through a mutual friend, and her tone was complicated. Concerned, maybe. Confused. "I'm not sure how Mom and Dad will take this," Liam said after the call, pacing the living room. "They're pretty traditional." I could see the worry etched on his face. "Have you thought about what you want to say to them?" He shook his head. "I don't even know if I'm ready." That night we stayed up late, talking through the fear, the what-ifs, the hopes. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let Liam face this alone. In the weeks that followed, we slowly started figuring out a plan together. Liam wrote emails to his parents, explaining things in his own words, and I helped him practice what he wanted to say if they called back. It was nerve-wracking, but it felt like progress. The day of the big conversation arrived faster than expected. Liam's phone buzzed, and he paused before answering. I sat beside him, offering silent support. "Hi, Mom," he said, voice steady but soft. The call lasted a while. When he hung up, relief and exhaustion washed over him. "They didn't understand everything," he said, "but they love me. They want me to be happy." I pulled him into a hug, feeling the tension in his body ease just a little. "What matters is that you're honest with yourself," I said, "and that you have people who love you for who you are." He looked up, eyes shining. "Thank you for being that person for me." It's funny how life throws curveballs, isn't it? A year ago, Liam was definitely straight, and I was just a guy looking for a cheap place to live. Now we're navigating uncharted territory together, rewriting our stories in ways neither of us expected. There's still a lot ahead, uncertainties, challenges, moments of doubt, but I've learned that love isn't about having it all figured out. It's about showing up, being honest, and choosing each other every day, no matter how messy the journey. And honestly, I wouldn't want it any other way. The weeks after that call from Liam's mom felt like walking a tightrope, exciting and terrifying at the same time. There were moments when Liam seemed lighter, like a weight had been lifted, and other times when the old fears crept back in, making him retreat into himself. I did my best to be patient, knowing that this was a journey, not a sprint. One evening, we were curled up on the couch watching some dumb comedy show, nothing that required much attention. Liam had his head resting on my shoulder, and I could feel the steady rise and fall of his breath. It was one of those rare moments where everything felt calm, safe. "I'm glad you moved in," he said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence, even if it messed up my whole straight guy image. I laughed, nudging him gently. "Hey, I like messing things up. Keeps life interesting." He smiled, then grew serious. "But honestly, if you hadn't been here, I don't know where I'd be. I was so stuck before. I was afraid to admit things to myself, let alone anyone else." I tightened my arm around him. "There's nothing wrong with being stuck. Sometimes it takes a push or a roommate to figure things out." He looked up at me, eyes searching. "Do you think people really change? Or is it just that they finally stop pretending?" That made me think. Maybe a bit of both. I think people grow when they stop lying to themselves. And sometimes, love is the thing that makes the truth loud enough to hear. Liam was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I want to keep growing. With you." We stayed like that for a while. Two guys who stumbled into each other's lives and somehow found something real. But just when I thought things were settling, life threw us another curveball. It was a Tuesday night when Liam's phone buzzed with a message from his boss. Apparently, word about our relationship had leaked around the office, and not everyone was thrilled. Liam didn't say much at first, but I could tell it was eating at him. The next day, he came home later than usual, shoulders hunched. I waited until we were alone to ask, "Everything okay?" I tried to sound casual. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Not really. Some people at work are making comments. Quiet ones, but they're there. It's like suddenly I'm this, other, now, and it's messing with my head." I hated seeing him like this. That please mess. But you know what? Screw them. You're amazing, and anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve a spot in your life. He managed a small smile. "Thanks, Jake. It means a lot." We spent the evening talking about how to handle the situation, whether Liam wanted to address it directly or let it fade. He decided to keep his head down for now, but promised to reach out if things got worse. That kind of stuff made me realize just how much bravery this whole process required from Liam. It's easy to say be yourself when you're on the outside, but living it, that's a whole other beast. One weekend, trying to take his mind off work drama, we went to a local art exhibit. Liam surprised me by actually getting into the pieces, asking questions, pointing out details I'd have missed. Watching him light up like that was a reminder of all the layers beneath that definitely straight surface he'd worn for so long. While we were there, an older couple approached us, smiling warmly. The woman said, "You two look happy. It's nice to see." Liam and I exchanged a glance, then laughed. "Yeah," I said, "we're figuring it out." After that day, things between us felt more solid, like we'd earned a few new scars and stories to add to the collection. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were nights when Liam's fears resurfaced. One night, after a particularly rough day at work, he burst into tears, the walls he'd built crumbling in an instant. "I don't know if I'm strong enough for this," he sobbed. "I'm scared I'll lose everything." I sat beside him, holding him close. "You're stronger than you think. And I'm not going anywhere." That moment was one of the most real and raw things I've ever experienced. It cemented something unspoken between us, a promise to face whatever comes as a team. As time went on, our relationship grew in ways I hadn't imagined. We celebrated small victories, like Liam coming out to a few close friends on his own terms, or us planning a weekend getaway without any pretense or fear. One night as we were getting ready for bed, Liam turned to me and said, "You know, I never thought I'd say this, but I'm happy, really happy." I smiled, tracing circles on his arm. "Me too. It's been a wild ride, but I wouldn't change a thing." He kissed me softly, and in that moment I felt like everything was exactly as it should be. Looking back, I'm amazed at how far we've come, from strangers sharing an apartment to two people daring to rewrite their stories together. Liam's journey from definitely straight to something beautifully undefined has taught me that love isn't about fitting into neat boxes. It's messy, unpredictable, and sometimes the best thing that ever happens to you. And honestly, I can't wait to see where we go from here. There's a quiet magic in reaching a place where you can just be yourself with someone else, and Liam and I found that in the most unexpected way. It didn't happen overnight or with some grand gesture. It was built slowly in those small, honest moments. The late-night talks, the nervous smiles, the shared meals burnt and perfect alike. A few months after that art exhibit, we decided to take a trip out of the city, a cabin in the woods, somewhere without Wi-Fi or distractions, just us and the sound of trees. It felt like the right moment to step away from everything and see where we were, not just as roommates or confused souls, but as something more. One evening, sitting by a campfire, Liam reached over and took my hand. The firelight flickered across his face, softening the shadows. He looked at me, really looked, and said, "I'm still figuring out who I am, but I'm certain about us, about what this means." I squeezed his hand, feeling that same certainty. Me too. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. We didn't need to say more. Sometimes words just get in the way of what's real. When we got back, life kept moving. Work, friends, weekends, the usual chaos. But something had shifted between us. We had a confidence born from honesty, from choosing each other over fear or expectation. One lazy Sunday, as we were cleaning up breakfast, Liam paused and smiled, that shy smile he used to hide behind. "You know," he said, "I don't think I'm ever going to have all the answers. But I'm okay with that, because with you, I don't have to." I pulled him close, feeling the warmth of a home built not from walls, but from trust. Same here. Looking back, it's wild to think how a Craigslist ad led to this, a messy, beautiful journey of two guys rewriting their stories. Liam, who once believed he was definitely straight, has taught me more about courage and love than I ever expected. We're still figuring things out, still navigating the unknown, but now we do it hand in hand. And sometimes that's all you need, because love isn't about fitting into boxes or having everything figured out. It's about choosing someone, day after day, through all the uncertainty. And when that happens, it feels like coming home,